The euro, it's the currency that powers the Eurozone, something that many of us take for granted. But in just a few months, the Eurozone Club will welcome a new member as Bulgaria will adopt the euro. In this week's episode of European Glimpse, we will talk about this obscure Balkan country. Many people associate Bulgaria with affordable Black Sea beaches and not much else. But given the euro adoption, it's time to take a closer look. First, let me give you a little context. So, the country has had a few tumultuous decades. From its time as a social state to the economic implosion of the 1990s, where organized crime and hyperinflation ran rampant and a third of the population left the country, there have been many rough moments. After years of fiscal discipline and geopolitical maneuvering, Bulgaria joined the European Union in 2013 and is now set to give up its own currency, the leu, in hope of a deeper integration into the European single market. But this change is coming at a complex time. In the past 5 years alone, Bulgarians have been called to the ballot 7 times amid widespread protests. It all sounds a bit messy, but it made me wonder, how do the people, especially the young people, feel about their lives? As someone with family in Bulgaria, I've visited every year and I watched the country's transformation firsthand, from the grim 1990s to the chaotic 2000s, and now to what I call pockets of progress in recent years. In cities like Sofia and Plovdiv, a new young middle class has emerged, with incomes and opportunities that were unimaginable a few decades ago. People can now travel globally and enjoy a lifestyle that once was reserved for a privileged few. It's a drastic change from the 1990s when visas were required to travel anywhere. Shelves in stores offered only a narrow selection of products, and a simple life was rather a necessity than a choice. It seems like people should be happier now, right? Well, according to a recent youth study that I found, the picture is more complex. I spoke with one of the study authors, Yanica Petkova. She's a political scientist at the sociological agency Miara in Sofia, and she walked me through her findings. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you listening. I see the downloads from all over Europe, the US, Brazil, Thailand, and many more places. It's pretty amazing. If you have any thoughts on the podcast or want to recommend a topic or a guest, please reach out to me at europeanglimpse@gmail.com. And now, let's get into the conversation. Yanica, welcome to the podcast. I'm very glad that you took time to speak with me today on Bulgaria and particularly on Bulgarian youth. It appears to me that there's been quite a lot of progress taking place, and as well from a political European standpoint, Bulgaria recently had the opportunity to join finally the Schengen zone and allowing more freedom of movement. And we now have a novel development that Bulgaria is as well going to join the Eurozone, which is as well something that draws a lot of attention to the country. And even though there has been quite a lot of dynamic and I would say as well a lot of progress taking place, I as well know that there are a lot of downsides that are pressing down on young people. And as young people are the new generation that are going to bring the future, we're going to speak about them. You are an expert on the attitudes of young people. So as an opening question, where would you say do young people stand? How is the mood?
Speak about the Eurozone. So in Bulgaria, the society is divided and there seem to be a lot of concerns and fear about the Eurozone, and there are recent surveys of public opinion that show that most of the Bulgarians are rather opposing. However, if we take only the youth people from this survey, we see that young Bulgarians are more positive towards the Eurozone, and maybe this is connected with the fact that they are traveling more, that they are more often in countries that use the euro. Also, most of them are born after Bulgaria is part of the EU, and they are more maybe prepared, and also they are raised with the expectancy that sooner or later we will be in the Eurozone, so they are much more positive towards. However, the Bulgarian youth seem to be divided. Recent years, maybe since 2020, when there were major protests in Bulgaria against corruption. So after those years, Bulgarian youth seem to be more and more divided, maybe even polarized. So there are a group among Bulgarian youth that seem to be more conservative, more nationalists, and also among them there are fears and negativity, both about the EU and its policies and about the Eurozone.
Break that down for me. You said that, of course, there's a lot of political instability in Bulgaria. For the listeners who don't know, there have been, I think it's 7 elections in the last 4 years. So every government is very unstable, lasting only a few months, less than a year typically. So break down for me the political attitudes within the young generation. I think you assessed in your study people between 14 to 29. You mentioned that there are some nationalist tendencies, but if we look at the entire spectrum, what types of attitudes do you observe?
We should back a few years. This survey is conducted in 2024, and it is part of a few waves of surveys among youth in Bulgaria. First one was in 2014, the second one was in 2018, and now it is the third wave. So traditionally in Bulgaria, most of the young people say that they are rather right, politically oriented on the political spectrum and rather liberal. This is mostly connected to our political history and socialist past. So the Socialist Party in Bulgaria is viewed in this prism. So most of the young Bulgarians, although they are answering left, they do not consider themselves to be left. And this is traditional for our country. But after 2020, 2021, we kind of see change in this political orientation. It is mostly maybe not quite understand even by the young people themselves, but it seems to be two groups. One group that lives mainly in the Sofia, in the capital city and the big cities, which is liberal and right, and another group which is more conservative, again maybe in the big cities, but mostly small cities, rural, outside of the capital city, and they seem to be more conservative, and this division is mainly after the protests of 2020. Then those protests were described mainly as youth protests. There were, of course, people participating of every age. However, both the media, analysts, and our society saw those protests as a youth protest because they were the main engine of the protest, the youth people in Bulgaria. And these protests led to new political parties, the rise of new political parties in Bulgaria, opposing the old political system, the party that ruled the country for 12 years, I think. But after those protests, there were elections held, which led to a rise of new parties, which were strongly supported by the youth. However, those parties could not, unfortunately, use the potential that they had for political change. And so we had 7 consecutive early elections, which combined with the war in Ukraine that influences Bulgarian public opinion a lot, and combined with the consequences of the COVID pandemic, led to this polarization that we now see, and there is a division among Bulgarian youth, among our whole society, which I think most of the analysis describe as liberal and conservative.
What would you say are the most relevant cleavages between both poles of the political spectrum? We mentioned already anti-corruption sentiment is very, very strong. You mentioned the war in Ukraine being another topic and the outcomes of COVID, but what are more topics that you see that politicize young people?
Honestly, they are two. One is East versus West in Bulgaria. So that is the first cleavage, which is traditional for our country. And the other one is corruption versus anti-corruption. And everything else could be somehow put in one of those two topics. The parties are divided in such a way, so are the people. However, in our country, the party system is in such way constructed that some of the parties that are pro-EU oriented are connected with corruption, and some of the parties that are pro-East oriented are anti-corruption. As for the youth, the main division maybe is liberal conservative, I think. It seems that they are mostly divided about topics that can be considered nationalist versus more liberal international oriented, and maybe they are mostly mobilized on the topics such as the EU. Most of the youth supports the European Union, and the main thing that unites young people for political actions is something that could be considered anti-corruption activity.
I would like to shift the focus to another block, and that's the topic of migration. I would like to know what are the views of young people.
So maybe I should start again with a little view from the past. The two previous surveys showed that less and less young Bulgarians are willing to immigrate, to leave the country and to start a life in another country. However, now we see a shift in those attitudes. Media representatives really pointed on that result from our survey, showing that only share of 26% of our respondents said that they are not willing to migrate. And in previous waves of the survey, the share was much higher. So why now many young Bulgarians say, yes, I could maybe leave the country? The answer for me and for my colleagues who worked on this survey is connected with a new type of attitudes that young Bulgarians form, which are mostly individualization and pragmatic attitudes. So if there is a chance for a better life, I might take it and leave. But there is another question in our survey that is connected to the preparations for living. And there we see that 80% of all of those who say, I may leave the country, have not made any preparations. They do not know when, they do not know where, they do not know why or how. So the possibility to leave is an action that sits in my mind is higher. However, there are no preparations made. So we see some kind of pragmatic mindset in young Bulgarians, which for me is connected to the uncertainty and anxiety that the recent years in Bulgaria and in the EU have presented to us. So Bulgarians are uncertain, they are maybe a little bit frightened, they have a lot of anxiety about the future. So they are having more options, and that is the way that I explain for myself this share of young people who say that they might leave the country. Also, the reasons for migrations are different. In previous waves of survey, the main reason for migration was higher salaries. Now we see answers that are much more connected with the overall standard of life. They just want to feel safer, they just want to live better, they just want to take care of themselves and their family. So maybe that is one possibility.
I think that's quite an interesting puzzle that you described, because on one hand, it has never been easier to leave Bulgaria. As we said, with Schengen and the European Union, things have gotten a lot easier. Bulgaria is one of the countries with nearly the largest share of immigration laws. Nearly 30% of the population shrunk since the collapse of the socialist system, and most people left in the 90s and 2000s, and with a lot of exodus. And now we have a very strong, a very small generation which is left in Bulgaria. Demographically, they don't play that much of a large role. The older generations are larger when we look at the demographic sizes. Do you think that the small number of young people adds to a certain psychological collective disappointment?
Maybe every aspect of this survey, especially when we speak about trust in institutions, in the parliament, in also in the EU and NATO, which are traditionally institutions that have higher levels of trust. This year, every institution that we survey showed a lower share of trust. Maybe one explanation is connected to the political crisis in Bulgaria from the recent years. Youth Bulgarians were highly active in the first elections that we had in our country after the protests. In contrast to popular belief, youth Bulgarians are not politically apathic. I have researched the topic, and my research shows that when we talk about voting, the voter turnout is higher than the other age groups. So in the first few elections, the young Bulgarians were very active, and they chose different parties, which then could not form a government. And so this led to distancing from the politics and from the political parties, and a rise of the distrust towards every institution. As for the growth of distrust in the EU and NATO, it is maybe part of the general trend of distrust. And something else that could be added is that some of the conversations in our country were, as I said, connected to the division East-West. A large share of the Bulgarians and also of the young Bulgarians were not satisfied with the way that you acted during the COVID crisis and also during the war in Ukraine. So maybe this also led to lower shares of trust. And finally, there is another possible explanation that is popular in our country. Trust is lower because young Bulgarians are finally feeling as a real part of the EU, real citizens of the EU. So when you are a part of something, you are most prone to be critical towards that thing. In the past decades, we were a member state. However, we viewed the European Union as something that is outside of us, something that controls us, maybe something foreign or alien. But now we are feeling as we are part of it, so we are more prone to be negative than the previous years.
I think there is as well a level of the sentiment of being second-class European citizens. I noticed the debate a lot around the Schengen zone and how it took so many years for Romania and Bulgaria to be accepted as full Schengen members. There was always some reason why it wouldn't work. And in the conversation as well with Romanians that I had, it was the sentiment like, okay, we are European Union citizens, but somehow not really. Somehow they still don't want us, and there's a lot of negative connotations with that. And now when you become embedded within the union as a full member, like both Schengen and soon as well the currency with the euro, I understand that perspective might be shifting. I never really thought about that. But what I'm curious to speak about is a little deeper on the notion of identity. You already outlined Bulgaria is traditionally torn a little bit between East and West. There's a pro-Russian attitude and sympathy, not only in the Socialist Party, but in general. Russia being viewed as the big Slavic brother by many people. They respect Russia and their politics. So this is one part, and the other part has always been, at least in the last 30 years, very Western-oriented, pro-US, pro-European Union. How would you describe the current identities that are forming? Do you rather see there's a tendency towards East, towards West, or is there maybe something more ethno-nationalist or something new emerging as a new modern identity?
This nationalist identity is not so much new as it is much more presented in the parliament now than it was a few years ago. The division East-West is as I said, traditional for our country. And however, in front of Bulgarians, and especially for young Bulgarians, the question, should we leave EU? Should we go east politically and geopolitically, does not stand. So the Bulgarians have sentiments about the past. However, they are not willing to shift their geopolitical orientation. The division that it is now is much more a reaction towards maybe current political decisions in our parliament and in the EU. It is a critical stance, but it is not anti-EU orientation, especially for young Bulgarians. We have asked in social surveys the question, should we leave EU? Many times. There is no age group that shows higher shares of answers yes, especially in the youth ages between 80 and 30 years old. A majority of the respondents say no, we should stay in the EU, this is our identity. However, as this is true, something else is true. There is rising polarization in our country, mainly because in the recent years the war in Ukraine led to the rise of a new type of political debate in our country, which really divides the society between East-oriented and West-oriented. However, this division is no half and half, 50-50. It looks more like this. We have a majority of the population, which is in between, in the middle, and we have one small share, which is very wild, and it is pro-West in every situation, no matter what the political decision, no matter who is the leader, no matter who is the party. And again, the same thing, we have one small, very active, very wild share, which are pro-East, no matter what Russia does, no matter the war. So these both shares are very loud and sometimes even aggressive towards one another, and the main population is divided. Most of the people in Bulgaria are rather in between. They want to be a part of the EU, but they want to share their sentiments about the past. They want to preserve their ideals about our past. They want to be able to preserve their tradition, identity even, but also they are feeling as a part of the EU. So this is most of the Bulgarians. Also, our society is mostly conservative. In many questions, we see that our society is mostly conservative. This is mostly because our society is aging.
When we're talking about Bulgaria being a European country, I do have to stress that there is a tendency in all of the European Union to become anti-immigration, or there are a lot of debates about anti-immigration sentiments. And Bulgaria over the last years has experienced, of course, a surge of Ukrainian refugees who came to Bulgaria. That was something very, I would say, unprecedented in the way it was handled, that there was as well a lot of support for Ukrainian refugees. There's been a lot of negative attitudes when we are speaking about people who are coming from Syria, Afghanistan, crossing the border via Turkey. This is very often a topic in the news. And at the same time, here and there, I am seeing a little bit of debate about workers' migration, because Bulgaria has such a drastic demographic decline, especially in the capital city of Sofia or on the beaches. You need people to work, you need people to cook, to clean, to help. And so migration is as well a new, very current topic. What are the attitudes that you see when we talk about immigrants coming to Bulgaria?
The reactions are mostly frightened. I mean is that there is higher shares of negativity towards migration, towards migrants. And actually, you said that there is a lack of labor force. Just a few weeks ago, there was a scandal in our parliament which affected this topic. A representative during debate in the Health Commission said to young medics who were protesting because they want a raise of their wage. And he said, if you don't want to work for low wages, we can always bring new people, new young specialists from other countries who would work for this wage. So this, of course, led to strong reactions in our society. There are protests at the moment, and especially young people reacted really intensive. And also because we are talking about healthcare and our society is aging, everybody reacted harsh on this. So that means that there is indeed fear and anxiety when it comes to new people coming here to take the workplaces. In Bulgaria, there is hunger for specialists, but also for other type of jobs that do not require higher education. In fact, the figures in our country really show that we are among the countries in the EU that suffer mostly from the demographic crisis. I will just give you one example. In 2014, when we had a survey among young people, the 17% of the population were young people. In 2017, 15% of the population were young people, and in the current wave of the survey, only 13.5% of the population is young people. This topic about someone coming and taking our jobs is more and more prone to be discussed in our political discourse, and many of the populist parties are using it. Something else, really, with the wave of migrants after the war in Ukraine, the first initiative reaction was support. After that, mainly because our authorities did not manage the help for those migrants in the best way, I think there was a negative backlash. So it is not one-sided. The data from our survey shows that most of the young Bulgarians are indeed negative towards migrants. However, if we see every different instance for migration, there is some kind of different explanation. However, something interesting, in the beginning of our conversation, I said that the recent survey, young Bulgarians are more pragmatic, and I said that maybe this is because they are more uncertain and frightened because of the recent few years. We asked a question about the fears. In every wave of the survey, there is a question, what are your biggest fears, or to what extent are you frightened? And usually the things that used to concern young Bulgarians were connected with the fear of corruption, not a good state of the democracy. However, now main fears are fear of war, fear of the bad healthcare system, again, fear of not being able to retire or have a good pension, and in connection to our conversation, fear from too many immigrants and refugees. So these fears show that young Bulgarians are frightened from things that are usually connected with an older age. Healthcare, pensions, war are not something that usually frightens young people. And maybe this fear from too many immigrants and refugees is connected to the fear that maybe our healthcare system could not take it, maybe our social system could not take it, and maybe I will not have a job. Of course, many populist and right populist parties are using these fears and are using it, of course, to gain popularity, and they are mainly talking negatively about refugees and migrants.
Yeah, they always instrumentalize it everywhere. And we've discussed a lot of negative things that are happening. I would like to close the conversation with a question of what are perceived upsides? What brings people optimism?
Question that asks our respondents, our young respondents, how do you see yourself in 10 years? And what is positive is that the majority of the answers are positive. I see my life to be better. 70-80% of all respondents were my life will be better. So young Bulgarians are mostly optimistic about themselves, and I personally connect this with the young age. And also the life in Bulgaria is now very similar to the life in every European capital when we talk about the capital. So when we asked the same question about the country, where do you see the country in 10 years? The answers were more grim. Around a third, a little bit over a third of the respondents said it will be worse, and a little bit under a third said it will be better. So maybe I cannot be very positive about the attitudes towards the political future of the country. However, what I can say is that these answers are very much a result of the current political situation and not so lack of hope for the future. I maybe should say once again we have protests in our country, and they are close as reasons, topics, and needs to what we had a few years ago in 2020. So we see that our society, and of course once again young people being motivated, are acting together and are taking actions to preserve democracy. So I see that positive. And there is strong activity among young people, and I see some kind of willingness for shared actions. And maybe lastly, I can say that when we talk about values among young people, values such as human rights, freedom in highest places. So I can also evaluate that as a positive.
Thank you for ending it on a positive note today. Janica, thank you very much as well for the introduction to the psyche of the current young generation in Bulgaria. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of European Glimpse. This is a passion project of mine, and it would make me very happy if you subscribed or shared this episode with a friend. Now I'm curious to find a new guest. Are you a journalist, a scholar, a student, or perhaps an avid observer of society? If you live in a European country, as well outside of the European Union, reach out to me or recommend somebody I should speak to. I would as well love to hear your feedback on this podcast, as I'm always trying to improve, and my email is europeanglimpse@gmail.com. Take care.